The Cipher of the Ancients. Chapter 5: The Lowest Point. The cool, damp air of the old cemetery hit me like a slap in the face. I welcomed the shock after the stifling darkness of the catacombs. The tombstone cracked against my shoulder blade as I collapsed against it, lichen crunching beneath my robes. Rotting petals clung to my boots. Roses turned to black sludge in this place where even decay goes to die. Ella's breath came in puffs of silver. Her gloved hands gripped a moss-eaten angel's wing as she scanned the crooked forest of monuments. Somewhere beneath our feet, the catacombs still hummed with pursuit. "Your genius escape route," she rasped, plucking a spiderweb from her long dark hair, "leads us to a cemetery that stinks of dead florist shops." I pulled out my flask and took a long pull, reaching it out in offering. "You wanted discreet?" Ella nodded. 3 miles through the guild quarter. Past the guard patrols. Under 6 separate ward boundaries. She grimaced. "Shall I list the 97 ways this plan reeks?" 98. I pushed off the grave marker, my mental gears grinding. The scent hit me first, burned ozone cutting through grave mold. A storm was coming. "We need a backdoor into those ruins. Someone who knows the faculties. Extracurricular habits." The flask paused mid-swig. "You cannot mean the velvet curtains still operational? Saw the lantern patterns changing when we crossed Merchant's Bridge." She swore in 3 languages, each more anatomically creative than the last. The brothel sign squealed on rusted chains, a gilded velvet curtain painted on a teardrop-shaped sign. 2 stories of stained glass windows depicted compromising positions between figures with clockwork limbs. The bouncer's augmented eyes flared at our approach. "Private club," he rumbled, methane lamps reflecting in his enhanced eyes. Ella stepped into the light, hips swinging just enough to make her coat sway. "Darling, we're sure Madame Lysandra will be interested in our gold," she crooned as she produced 2 pieces of gold, tucking them into his vest pocket with a pat. The man's head nodded, then he stamped his foot twice. A hidden door ground opened beside the stained glass orgy, exhaling amber light and the tang of arcane incense. Inside, the velvet circuit stunk of luxury and lies. Transparent silk-clothed courtesans rotated on gilded platforms, their porcelain faces frozen in ecstasy as mages in midnight robes adjusted their pleasure dials. A mechanized harp clattered through a dirge-like rendition of the Ballad of Shattered Mirrors. Ella's shoulder brushed mine, a barely there contact that meant, "Stay sharp." Madame Lysandra emerged in a cloud of smoke from her vaporizer pipe. Her gown's silk shimmered between states, one moment embroidered with celestial maps, the next with obscene shadows and languid, erotic motions. She examined us for a moment. "Still trading in shadows, Elradar?" Her laugh rasped like a key turning in a rusted lock. "Last I heard, the magpie wanted your liver pickled in alchemical brine." I nodded and leaned against a support beam. "Heard you've been hosting the High Arcania Academy faculties. Nocturnal curriculum. Even after the High Provost's unfortunate combustion." Her smile tightened, the corners of her mouth drawing in, not with joy but with a steely resolve, her eyes narrowing as they reflected the dim light, casting shadows across her face that spoke volumes of our perilous situation. Ella tossed the velvet pouch onto the worn lacquer table between us, cutting the tension. Gold coins spread across the table, drawing Lysandra's eyes away from my face. "We need ingress. Not the main gates." Lysandra didn't move to touch the money. Her augmented parrot, brass beak gleaming, swooped down to peck at the bag. "The college ruins are warded tighter than a virgin's. Think we crawled through corpse tunnels for the view?" I interrupted. Anger at her deflection spread through my veins, adrenaline sharpening the room's edges into knife lines. "Your girls service the senior staff. There's a back route. For discretion." Silence stretched like a garrote wire. Somewhere, a kettle hissed high and shrill. When Lysandra finally moved, it was to press a concealed panel behind her. A drawer slid open, disgorging a map etched on translucent wire bladder parchment. "The moonlit stair," she purred. "Behind the Hall of Errant Spells. Your partner here." She nodded at Ella, giving her a cruel smirk. Might recognize the entry sequence. Ella went statue still. Lysandra smiled wider. Seems the headmaster enjoys roleplay with thieves who quote pre-collapse poetry. The madam traced a venomous nail over the map's labyrinthine lines. 300 gold. Or. Ella's boot pressed against mine, a warning. I tossed 2 extra platinum coins onto the pile. Keep the extra. Lysandra's nostrils flared, but she swept the coins into a hidden compartment. The stair resets at dawn. Try not to die screaming, it upsets the girl's calibration. As we retreated through the heavy curtains, their fabrics saturated with the pungent odor of spell-tainted sweat, I found myself yearning to once again inhale the familiar, gritty aroma of Arcania's streets. The air outside, filled with the mingled scents of smoke, spices, and unwashed humanity, seemed almost inviting compared to the oppressive atmosphere we left behind. A shiver washed down my spine as we walked away. Some deals even gold couldn't sanitize. The river rank emitted a foul stench that clung to the air, a rank odor that seemed to seep into every corner of Arcania. Its murky, dark surface was a sluggish conveyor of debris, raw sewage, and other unspeakable filth as it meandered through the city's indifferent streets. In the stagnant pools where the water slowed and the sewage accumulated, monstrous creatures like Adia and even more dreadful beings were known to dwell, adding to the river's ominous reputation. We wound our way, 2 shadows in the dark miasma of fog and stench rising from the fretted water. The moon conspired to be full, yet only offered dull, oppressive illumination through the rising fog. Ella and I moved silently, the ground beneath our feet slick from the rising mist. The path was barely wide enough for one, forcing us into single file, the river on one side threatening to claim us with a misstep, and on the other, the looming presence of the Academy's high walls, a bastion of arcane knowledge and power. We followed the path until it led us to an old, forgotten part of the Academy's outer wall, where Lysandra had indicated. The apple in my hand glowed softly, its light catching on an ancient rune carved into the stone, invisible to the untrained eye. I reached out, my fingers tracing the cold, rough surface until they found the rune, and I flowed my mana into it, releasing its magic. The air shimmered, and before us, the stone seemed to melt away, revealing a staircase that wasn't there moments before, its steps glowing with an ethereal light, inviting yet intimidating. We quickly ascended. Once atop the wall, we had a clear view of the Academy grounds, the old castle standing out like a relic of time, its ruins telling stories of past glories. Thankfully, it was near to the wall we were on, as it had, in ancient times, used the river as a moat. The castle was a skeleton of its former self, with ivy clinging to its stones like a second skin. We found an opening, a crack in crumbling walls, and slipped inside. The interior was a maze of fallen arches and broken statues, the air thick with dust and the echo of bygone days. I pulled out the apple, focusing on a path down as we navigated the rotten skeleton of the castle, its light leading us to a hidden trapdoor beneath what was probably once a throne, but now just a jumble of rock. With a coordinated effort, we opened it, revealing a descent into the darkness of the dungeon below. Down we went, into the bowels of the castle, where the air grew colder, the silence heavier, until we found the passage collapsed and impassable. This was probably once an escape tunnel to the river or beyond, I surmised, trying to gauge how far down we had come and our general direction. We are possibly under the river, even now, I mused. Ella, however, seemed to have spotted something in the collapsed tunnel and was busy digging. I bent down and noticed the familiar blue of a hidden passage to the left that Ella was exposing. I put the apple away, and the glow faded. We toiled for hours, risking collapse as the rubble shifted, occasionally using the apple to check our progress until the hidden catch was finally revealed, and a hidden doorway slid inward, spilling stone and timbers, and threatening further collapse. Inside was a curious room. Broken alchemical glassware and long crumbling tomes lay strewn about. The only thing of interest highlighted in the apple's glow was a pedestal of black stone, upon which lay the third piece of the ethereal apple, its surface shimmering in light. "Bingo!" exclaimed Ella with delight. She reached forth and wrapped her hands gently around it. She infused the apple with her arcane energies and gave a perplexed expression. You just walked 4 ways at once, she exclaimed. Maybe it explores the near future? The last slice affected time, I surmised. Makes sense. Here. She held it out to me. You try. I'm going to imagine 3 possible courses of action. You tell me what you see. I activated the apple and saw her sit, walk out the door, and do jumping jacks all at the same time. It was confusing and overwhelming. I told her what I saw, and she nodded. On a whim, I took out the second slice and infused both. Think of as many possibilities as you can, I requested. Instead of responding, she suddenly became a blur. I applied the second slice's time-slowing power, and the world slowed, or my mind sped up, allowing me to see all the possibilities at once. This lasted until one of the Ellis kissed me, and I dropped my concentration in surprise. What? She quirked. Nothing. It worked, was all I said in reply to her widening grin. We retreated from what lay below and crawled back through the crack in the castle wall through which we had entered. Apologies, darling, Lysandra purred as we stood, flanked by crows and raven feather greatcoats. The magpie pays better bonuses for live specimens. We stood surprised and surrounded, but never helpless. Ella's thrown boot knife glinted in the dim light as it swiftly and silently found its mark, slicing into a crow's throat before his fingers could even brush the fletching of an arrow. I was in motion before his lifeless body hit the ground, my limbs a blur of speed and precision, fueled by the potent energy of the apple. My reflexes were as sharp as the blade itself, driving another assailant's face into the cold, unforgiving stone of the castle wall. His cry of pain joined in a discordant symphony with the powerful thunderclap blast I unleashed, resonating through the air towards the group advancing on me, their expressions turning from confidence to fear as they staggered under the force. The East Gate! Ella's voice cracked as a net of articulated copper weights descended. She rolled, the mesh catching only her left arm. For half a heartbeat, I saw her as the dockside rat she was at 16, all teeth and survival. Then the stun baton hit her spine. The apple showed me 7 exit strategies. 6 required leaving her twitching on wet cobblestones. The 7th involved the ornamental cannon loaded for graduation ceremonies. I chose violence. Black powder stung my eyes as my magic sparked the fuse. Lysandra's perfect coiffure caught fire first. In the chaos of screaming crows and smelting flesh, I almost reached Ella. Almost. Her fingers brushed mine. A lead-weighted net took her down hard. Through the smoke, I saw the interrogation pliers in the lead crow's belt. Then the world was spinning and flipping from an unseen spell blast which tossed me like a rag doll over the wall and landed me in the cold, fetid waters of the rank. The current carried me away on uncaring arms as my brain refused to understand what had just happened.